All right. So, more on the hard problem of consciousness. So, the one of the problems with this problem, with this question, is the ambiguity of it all. The word consciousness has lost any utilization. It we don't know what we're talking about when we talk about consciousness. So this is a video to try to clear it up and get things concrete so there isn't so much ambiguity, because part of the reason why we can't come to a conclusion is because half of the problem is with the definitions of things. We don't even know what we're talking about when we say these words. We can't agree upon what we're talking about. So this is from Chalmers himself. This is the hard problem of consciousness, right from the dude. How do physical processes in the brain give rise to the subjective experience of the mind and of the world? So he could have just stopped at how do physical processes in the brain give rise to subjective experience. Could have just stopped there, but he kept going to say of the mind and the world. Okay, so what is subjective experience? Why can we say that there's a subjective experience? And what is mind? And I think we kind of know what the world is, but what is mind? So what this model is saying is that the subjective experience is the sense of self. And this question is making the assumption that the sense of self arises, is created by functionings in the brain. Whereas Advaita Vedanta and non-conceptuality says that the subjective experience of the self is fundamental reality. Everything arises from that. So, and now the problem is, well, what is mind? What does he mean when he says mind? So, I think that when he says mind, and when most people say mind, the distinction they're making is, when they say mind, they mean the functionings of the brain, right? They mean all electrical impulses that are happening in the brain. That is mind, I think. So that makes a very stark separation between what's going on in the head and the world. So the world has been delegated to being completely inside the brain, and the world is now just electrical impulses in the brain. But so are thoughts, right? The voice in your head is not outside the world. So there is a distinction there, right? You can't see, touch, smell, taste, or hear. Well, you can hear. There's a correlation between thoughts and the auditory world, isn't there? Because we call it a voice in our head. But anyway, you can't find the source of thoughts in the world, can you? So therefore, to me, it's not a part of the world. Thoughts, the voice in your head, originates from somewhere else. It doesn't come from all out here, right? So to me, that is where the distinction should be made. The very sharp distinction between what's coming from the outside and what is going on the inside, right? So this is where the dividing line should be, is that thoughts are non-physical and senses are physical. So we shouldn't mix them all up into a set here, because this is just confusing. This should not be the separation that we're talking about. Because in order to talk about things and analyze things, there has to be distinction, right? So that if that distinction is ambiguous and not sharp and well defined and understood by everyone involved in the discussion, then there will be no progress made in the discussion. We'll just go around and round and round like everyone's freaking doing, just around and around and around. Most of it's just semantics, trying to understand what we're saying. So this is how it should be. This is the model that I am presenting, so that we could start with this model maybe, and then possibly get somewhere in a discussion, rather than just discussing the model, trying to figure out where to start from. What's the starting point? We can't even agree on that. So I'm suggesting that this is the starting point. This model works. If you just accept it, it works. There's a very sharp distinction between thoughts that are all inside here and this stuff which is out there. Right? Non-physical, physical. So here's something to think about. So if the functioning of the brain gives rise to thoughts and sensations, right? The world, mind and the world, then in dreamless sleep, where there is no thought, where there are no thoughts and there is no world, right? There's no time, there's no world. There's no thoughts, which thoughts basically generate the appearance, the illusion of time, and sensations gives the appearance of space, right? Of the outside world, of the physical world. So in dreamless sleep, are there still electrical impulses going on in the brain? Is the brain still functioning in dreamless sleep? And if it is, if there's even the subtlest movement of electron or whatever's going on, electrical impulses in the brain, in dreamless sleep, then how is it that there's no world? You see what I'm seeing is that if electrical impulses in the brain give rise to thoughts and sensations, then if the brain is operative if you can measure shit going on in the brain in dreamless sleep, then how is there no world? How is there not a world and thoughts? So obviously, the electrical impulses in the brain and the functioning of the brain does not give rise to mind and the world. Is this not self-evident? So feel free to have this discussion with me, someone that likes discussing this stuff, and answer that question. Answer the question, please. If electrical impulses in the brain give rise to mind in the world, or time and space, then how is it that in dreamless sleep, when there is still functioning of the brain, that none of that stuff arises? It's because the self is primary. The self is absolute. And these appearances arise from self, from awareness. And that just so happens that you can't describe, you can't define or describe the reality, the self, the absolute, any more succinctly than the manifestation of the world itself. The world itself is the description and the definition of the self, the entire thing, all of it. So, anyone care to answer any of these questions?